It's 4 o'clock in Radio Cairo, and this is World of Info coming live from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and today in this beautiful, a bit sunny afternoon in Cairo, we are going to stay with you from 4 till 5 p.m. Stay tuned with us.
Mr. Cellophane, should I bend my name, Mr. Cellophane, 'cause you can.
As I said to you, we're coming live from Studio 3, and our direct line number is 257-89407, coming live from Studio 3, World of Info. And today we have a very distinguished guest, the first lady to win a Naguib Mahfouz award, and a writer since the age of 12, and a lady who studied all through her years, making a friendship with literature, and doing at the same time changing a hobby, which is writing, to a semi-profession, studying in Alexandria University, the beautiful cosmopolitan city of Alexandria, in the Faculty of Arts with a degree in literature, and taking a journey to Oxford University to study there for a master's and a PhD degree in linguistics, and working as a lecturer in Oxford and Cambridge, and then a tenure professorship in the Georgetown University in DC for more than 7 years. And then a great decision, a comeback decision to the roots, to the country of origin, to Cairo, to Egypt, where she has a tenure as a professor of linguistics in AUC since 2013. And today we have a great pleasure and honor to have with us the one and only Dr. Reem Bsiyoni. Good afternoon, Dr. Reem.
With you today, Dr. Amr, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's a very kind of you to join us in this beautiful afternoon in Cairo, and today we are going to talk about your book, your beautiful trilogy of Awlad al-Nas, Sulasiyat al-Mamalik. And before we go there, we have to talk about something else. I mean, it's really been a lot of years in preparation for writing such a book. It's not just people would say that Dr. Reem, or as you simply write your name, Reem Bsiyoni, has written a book about the Mamalik or the Mamluks. While actually nobody can see in between the lines that you have been studying all through your life. And literature has become, as I have said, has changed from a hobby to a semi-profession, and at the same time, you've prepared yourself well. I mean, how was that possible?
Yeah, it needed a lot of work, I have to say. I mean, I worked for 3 years doing research in Arabic and in English, and getting some people to translate from French and Italian as well, since I am not that good at French and Italian. But it needed a lot of research, which I actually enjoyed very much, given that I'm a researcher myself. I think this helped a lot. So since I'm used to the idea of collecting information or trying to come up with the relevant facts that I will need for my work, it was quite enjoyable but also challenging to do research on the Mamluk period. I spent 3 years visiting the monuments in Cairo and outside Cairo, for example in Rashid, and also trying to read about this period and understand the richness and the culture behind this history that is really to a great extent unfortunately lost in our books at school, and we don't really learn that much about the Mamluk period at all.
But before we go into Awlad al-Nas, which we are dedicating most of our episode today, we have to talk about your experience in writing. And I had the honor and pleasure in reading a lot of your works that you started publishing since 2006, Ba' al-Fustuk, or the Fustuk, or the
2005.
2005.
Yeah, Ra'ihat al-Bahr.
And Ra'ihat al-Bahr, yes, and then Ba' al-Fustuk, and then Dr. Hana, and then Love on the Arabic Way, and Ashya' Ra'i'a, Beautiful Things, and Tourist Guide in 2017. I think this was an enriching experience. When I read your prose, I find that it is very smooth and easygoing, and you have been studying English all through your life since the EGC, which is the English Girls College in Alexandria, and you're working in your study in the Faculty of Arts and in Oxford and Cambridge and the United States. All this was in English, so I find it really very tempting to ask you the question. You have chosen to write in your mother's tongue, and this is really a big challenge. How was that possible, to be studying and working everything in English and yet writing in Arabic, and a beautiful prose Arabic? Tell us about this, because this is a very interesting point.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much, first of all. I actually think that when I started writing, I was 12 years old, and I wrote my first novel in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
Although, as you just said, I'm mostly bilingual. I mean, I studied English throughout my life, and I specialized in English literature as my first degree, and then after that in linguistics, but linguistics is much more general than just, it's not just English, it's languages of the world, basically. But I find that I can only express myself truthfully in writing fiction in Arabic. While actually all my academic work, I have 8 books, academic books, that are written in English. So I tried to write fiction in English, but I really couldn't express all my ideas. Yes. There was something missing. You know, sometimes they say artists experiment a lot, and I tried to experiment with a number of things to express myself. I actually tried drawing at one point, and I tried also writing fiction in English. And although I did publish some short stories in English, I couldn't really write a whole novel in English without feeling that there's something missing. So that's why I decided that my fiction will be in Arabic, because this is my mother tongue, and this is how I write about Egypt, I write about the Arab world, so this is the language that reflects this specific area in the world. And for my academic writing, which is very different, by the way, because my fiction writing is much more, although it needs a lot of research, but it's much more spontaneous. It's much more an inspiration. But with my academic writing, I really have to think a lot. I have to prepare. I have to, have a specific structure. While I do the same thing with my novels, I have much more freedom. So I find that writing in Arabic is a kind of liberation. It liberates me. It makes me express myself. Perhaps it goes hand in hand with having an academic career in which you do have a lot of restrictions. You know, you have the rules, you have how you should write your references, how you should write your examples, how you should express yourself. And so this is all done in English, but once I am liberated, I write in Arabic. So Arabic is a kind of liberating language for me.
And I think, yesterday when we were talking off air in preparing for this beautiful program, we were discussing with you that the fact that you traveled on your own initiative and your own account, your late father's account, to study in Oxford. So I think that the influence of your dear father was really very important. He encouraged you to study literature. He encouraged you to work on reading Arabic, because a lot of youngsters nowadays find that Arabic is not à la mode, if we use the bad expression. Sure. Yes. So I think that it was definitely parental from both sides, from your father and your mother, not pressure, but increasing your appetite towards reading Arabic literature.
Definitely. I mean, both my parents are really avid readers, and this helped a lot. I could see my mother could discuss with me novels in Arabic. My father, his library is just amazing. There's nothing that he didn't read. There's no fiction in Arabic that he didn't read, and he read translations as well. And so I think that really made a lot of difference in my life. Also, my parents encouraged me at a time when perhaps girls were not really encouraged to go and study by themselves. My parents did encourage me to go abroad. They paid for Oxford, which was quite expensive, but they also were very proud that I was going to Oxford, and they really wanted me to do well. And this makes a lot of difference. I think parents who are ready to give support without pressure. I think this is the difference. I mean, you have to support your kids no matter what they're doing, but without pressurizing them to do something specific. So I think they were very speaking about this idea of freedom and liberation. I think they gave me so much freedom to do whatever I wanted to do, that I could actually express myself much more in literature. So the idea of freedom and liberation and writing fiction, I always think about hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. So of course, the idea of linguistics. Your specialty or your undergraduate degree was in literature. And literature, you get exposed to reading a lot of novels and a lot of literature, and even comparative literature courses even in the undergraduate degrees. But what is linguistics, if you can explain to our dear listeners, and what is so special about it that you decided to follow a career in it?
Linguistics is a very big field, and we can't really speak about it in an hour or even a year.
No,
But
of course
what I
not. We'll
do-
just give it a short introduction because we are.
Definitely. What I do is sociolinguistics, which is basically the relationship between language and society. How is language related to society? If we think about language as part of society, it's the way we express our identity. It's like dress. It's like, which club do you go to? It's like a social code in a way. So we think about language as an expression of who we are. And in that sense, my research is very much related to my writing, because I do write about identity. And I do have 3 or 4 books that are about identity in my academic writing. And my speciality, which is this relationship between language and society, helped me a lot choose my vocabulary when I write in Arabic. It helped me choose my language, whether I should write in Standard Arabic or Egyptian Arabic, for example. And it helped me express myself better, I think. So while at the very beginning of my career, I was thinking, I should be studying literature only and doing my PhD in literature, I found out that doing linguistics actually is much more helpful for me in my career as a writer.
Mm-hmm. So the start was not historical novels, but were novels more or less related to living in diaspora. I mean, for example, the Murshid al-Siyahi, and a lot of these books, some of them were dealing with people who are living abroad or people who are living by al-Fusduq. I think all this we're going to discuss them, as you have promised, dearly in another program. But
sure, I would love
so
to.
this was like an experience of the writer in the West and in other countries, and the intermingling between the Middle Eastern Oriental background and living in diaspora, wherever the diaspora is. And then you have decided to take a very localized window, which is really very much appreciated. I mean, it was like throwing a stone in stagnant water. Everybody was talking about your beautiful novel about the Mamluks, and suddenly this is a slight shift from I think it's 180 degrees shift from your previous novels, which I believe are really masterpieces, and the messages in them is clear. That's why we want to dedicate another program to them, another episode. So tell us what pushed you, or what put you on the track of historical novels.
Historical novels are, I mean, I didn't actually think about the Mamluks. I didn't know very much about the history of the Mamluks until I visited Sultan Hassan School and Mosque in 2013. Mm-hmm. And this was somehow the beginning of my introduction to this amazingly rich culture and history. So after my visit to Sultan Hassan Mosque, I wanted to read a little bit more about Sultan Hassan, to know who he is and what is he doing. So I started my journey through this amazing period, rich period in the history of Egypt, which is about 300 years, and that we know very little about. I never thought when I was young that I'm going to write about the Mamluks specifically, although I did think that I'm going to write a historical novel, because I started at the age of 16 to write a historical fiction about the Arabs going to Andalus for the first time with Tariq ibn Ziyad. Mm-hmm. And so I did try to write history and mingle history with fiction before. It's just that I never actually finished this specific novel, and then I left it and started writing about modern Egypt with a historical flavor, but not necessarily a kind of historical fiction. Mm-hmm. So this was my first attempt at writing and publishing historical fiction,
which was, by the way, of course, definitely a great success. And since we are going to start talking about this beautiful novel, Awlad al-Nas, or how would you like to translate it in English, the address of the book, or the title of the book?
I think that's a very tricky question, because Awlad
yes,
al-Nas,
I mean it.
definitely, because Awlad al-Nas in Arabic entails both females and males.
Yes.
But in English, it's sons of the people, so it's going to be only males. So I think that's the first kind of challenge.
So we should call it Children of the People. How about that?
We can do that, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
So,
so I have this trademark from my side, all right? So we're talking about Children of the People, and please stay tuned with us. We are here, we are proud to have with us Dr. Reem Bsiyoni, the professor in the AUC of linguistics, and at the same time the author of the famous, beautiful novel, the Children of the People, or أولاد الناس, the Mamluks trilogy by Reem Bsiyoni. After the break, stay tuned to Radio Cairo. So we're still tuned to, you're still tuned to the World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and with us on air is Dr. Reem Bsiyoni, the professor of linguistics in the AUC and the author of Children of the People, the Mamluks trilogy. And we were just starting to talk about the Mamluks. And a lot of people are really, we had always, I think we had something wrong that we studied in history, which is the two gaps. I believe that we have studied in our history books in the first year of secondary school, or on the third year of preparatory school, we studied Salah ad-Din carefully. And then we heard about Qutuz, and we heard about Shajarat ad-Durr, and we have seen the two movies, the Saladin movie and the Qutuz movie, or Wa Islamah, and suddenly everything broken into pieces, and we found ourselves in the Ottoman invasion of Egypt in 1517, and then suddenly we heard about the massacre of the Mamluks. And this is definitely giving a very wrong image and wrong message about the Mamluks, the system that is so strange and so unique. It's the only system in the world where a slave can become a king, where children are taken up as slaves, given up both by rich commanders and leaders. And this, of course, the one who did that was Salah Najm ad-Din Ayyub, as the first one who introduced the Mamluk system, raising children in barracks, giving them very high education, very sophisticated military training, and making them soldiers, and not soldiers of fortune, but soldiers who really are loyal to the Sultan. And later on, they're giving their liberty, become officers and princes and generals. And sometimes in certain periods of time, these Mamluks or these generals will have a sort of a coup d'etat or whatever, and then they become sultans themselves and kings. And sometimes they end up in jail, and their fortunes and misfortunes are tremendous. And really we are very grateful that you have shown part of this fortunes and misfortunes of the Mamluks. So the people got mixed up, and the people have a wrong image and wrong information about the Ayyubids, about the Mamluks and the starting of the system. But you started getting us into the first period of the Mamluks. Everybody has seen, didn't have heard that Zahar Beybers killed Qutuz, have seen some of these soap operas, and nobody knows that Beybers is one of the best people who have ever led this country, and was a very important sultan for 17 years. But I'm jumping that, and I'm leaving you to the mic after we talk about Qalawun, who was also one of the Salah Najm ad-Din Mamluks, and later on he became a very important figure as a founder of a semi-dynasty. And we are talking about his great son, Nasir Muhammad. And this is the beautiful picture that you have given us. So tell us about the introduction. What made you very much interested in Nasir Muhammad and his Mamluks, and of course later on the Sultan Hassan?
I think because I started my research with Sultan Hassan Mosque, so I was very much interested in the time period within this, just before the mosque was built, or just after the mosque was built. At the very beginning, this is how I started. But I mean, this kind of beginning made me delve deep into the history of the Mamluks. And as you just mentioned now, we have 267 years of Egyptian history that is not necessarily treated as an independent state, while in reality Egypt was an independent state. It was an empire that was ruling other parts of the Arab world, including Hijaz and Sham and all these areas. So that was extremely important. And all of this, we have the capital, all of this area was actually Cairo at the time. And so that was a finding even for me. And lots of people in Egypt mix the Ottomans and the Mamluks. And as you just mentioned now, lots of people also ask me sometimes, so what happened with this massacre of the Mamluks later on?
Which is almost...
It's like 500 years later.
It is 300 years later, almost 300 years later from
exactly.
after the Ottoman invasion. I mean, this is...
Exactly. So
this
that's
is absurd,
a completely
yes.
different time. But I think the question is actually legitimate because we don't really know very much about this history. While in reality, when I read about it in resources, foreign resources, as you just mentioned, the idea that slaves became kings, and that it was not necessarily the case that the son will rule. There was always the idea of the superiority of the fighter.
Yes.
You know, the person who was trained to be a fighter always was superior to everyone else, because this is a person who's going to sacrifice his life for the country or for religion or for whatever the things that they decide on. And so that was something that was extremely unique and did not happen anywhere else on earth. And you mentioned Qalawun, and Qalawun took Qalawun the father took Egypt from the sons of Babers.
Babers, yes.
And so this idea that
the two sons of Babers ruled regularly. I mean, consecutively. The two sons of Babers ruled after the premature death of Babers in the year 1277, and Salamish and Mahmud. They've taken it for a very short period of time, and they were quite young. So Qalawun was a really wise man. And really, I think since you are very much into art, we want to attract the attention of our listeners to the complex of Qalawun in Shara al-Mu'azz al-Din Last Street.
Exactly, the hospital as well.
I mean, the hospital has been working since the year 1282 till today. And the mausoleum, the school, the sabil, and the most important sentimental part is that it lies exactly in front of the complex of Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub, his mentor, his owner. So Qalawun has been always named and called Qalawun as-Salihi because he was belonging to Salih Najm al-Din. So this great mixture of education and of art and human nature, this is really very tempting. So definitely Qalawun was special, but I believe his son was a great example, and I really congratulate you on choosing the son to be the side character of the first novel.
Sure. I mean, his role is actually quite important. He ruled Egypt for about 40 years.
And he was the great builder. He and his all his associates, they became very much into building.
And this idea of when we say Egypt is the mother of the world, you have it in songs, it's a very famous saying. This is a saying of Ibn Battuta when he visited Cairo during the time of Nasser Muhammad ibn Qalawun. Yes. So that's extremely important. And again, these are 40 years in Egyptian history that people don't know very much about in terms of buildings, in terms of culture, in terms of writings. It's a very important time. And it's also a time when everything flourished. It's a time of civilization, and it's the last civilization in the Islamic world. I mean, the Mamluks are basically the last civilization for Egypt, at least. This time of flourishing, this time of being the center of the world in a way, because of trade, it was actually the center of the world as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. And being a place where interactions were possible, being a place where exchange of ideas between the West and the East was possible and encouraged. We also, of course, there were times when there were kind of problems between Christians and Muslims and Jews, but these were very rare compared to the coherence of the community. The idea that people could come, they could migrate to Egypt, and they could live peacefully no matter what their belief is. We're thinking about Middle Ages, late Middle Ages. So if there was a community like that in the late Middle Ages, we really have to applaud it and think highly of it, because these are things that we're calling for now, and even now they are very challenging. And so I think these kind of things are very important. I tried to highlight this in my novel as much as possible through the story as well, through the story of having the Mamluks and the Egyptians together, coming from, mingling together from different places, and also sort of being blended into one, which is basically the children of the people.
Yes, and I think we should attract the attention of our audience, simply, our dear listeners, that when you look at the complex of Qalawun, you'll find right next to it the complex of his son Nasser Muhammad, And Nasser Muhammad, the great builder, has decided to build not a modest structure, but a structure that is more or less symmetrical to the structure of his father, in due respect to his father. And at the same time, there is a beautiful entrance of this mosque, which shows how this was a great civilization, because it has the entrance is the same entrance of the Cathedral of Akron, that has been taken up, dislodged, and placed in the front of this mosque as a memorabilia of the end of the Crusades in the Middle East in 1291 with Khalil, the son of the brother of Nasr Muhammad. But the idea is that there was no massacre in Akron. The Crusaders were allowed to leave, and they left afterwards to Crete, and then to Cyprus, and then to Malta, but they were not massacred. So this is a very important point to talk about Nasr Muhammad, the great builder, and we go to the Prince Muhammad and Zainab. It's a very romantic story, very touchy story, and a lot of controversies in it. What do you think of the controversies that you brought in this beautiful section? I mean, a guy who kidnaps a lady, this is against the law, and then the lady who was a bride-to-be to her cousin, and then suddenly she finds herself wedded to I mean, this is almost like rape, you know.
Sure, but I think that the problem is that we need to again free ourselves from all the from our modern times ideas and think about this as Middle Ages.
We have to look at it a different way, because this is, we cannot judge them because they are the children of their times.
Definitely, and everything that might seem very illogical to us nowadays might have been very logical at the time. And this is extremely important when we're reading history, because it could actually it could make us misjudge some characters in history. You know, where there are certain things that we think about now as atrocious, but at that time it was quite normal, or even it might have even been a kind of show of mercy for whatever reason. So I think it's very important that we read history not as with our modern eye. I mean, that's another thing that we do in linguistics as well. We try to be very objective, but also we have to be aware of our own ideologies. I think we all come from different backgrounds. We all come with our own package of ideas of who we are and what we stand for. And if we let that interfere in our reading of anything, it will make us not necessarily very objective. So I think that was extremely important even for me when I was writing. And I did have this dilemma. You know, I was writing and I was thinking, okay, people might think this is a little bit shocking. At the same time, people might just realize that I'm trying to be very honest here and express at a specific time. Also, they might read beyond the story to look at the symbolic value of Zainab and Hind in the last part of the novel. Because what I'm trying to do throughout this novel is speak about the mosque as representative of different times in Egyptian history. You know, and the building of this mosque, which is considered the fourth pyramid in Egypt. It's one of the most important monuments in the whole world. And so if we look at the Sultan Hassan Mosque at the very beginning and how it was built, and then we look at the fact that it became like a place for war and for fighting between different Mamluk factions. Yes, exactly. And then at the end, it was plundered by Selim and his army. So we have these kind of three different phases for the mosque, and that was something that I was very interested in showing to the readers.
And of course, this is a very important point to speak and to get that everybody, when he looks to the monuments, sometimes people get carried away by describing the shape of the minaret, the shape of the dome, and the structure of the minbar, and how beautiful the art is. Yes, of course, this is very important from the architecture point of view. But before we talk about the stone, we have to talk about the people behind the stones. And I think this is what makes this novel of yours very interesting, because it has changed the stones into flesh and blood. And nothing, I mean, today I was thinking, for example, that why everything that we remember in our lives, when we remember, for example, Alexandria or the beach or whatever, there has to be in the picture that you're going to remember a human being. Well, this is human being is a friend, an enemy, a lover, or whatever. You can never relate to a structure without putting a human being in the image. And that's why these Mamluks were so intelligent in placing their names and their characters and their motives in the structures that they have built. And sometimes people get carried away and forget and start describing the structure and forgetting the person behind the structure. So Muhammad, the Prince Muhammad, was a real character, not very fictitious, and he has built his own small mosque, and unfortunately part of this mosque is demolished. But we are very much interested into the son of Prince Muhammad, who is, of course, one of the children of the people. So the idea or the trick is that a child of a Mamluk will never be an officer or a soldier. And therefore, since all soldiers have to be slaves, and this is a free man, so he's not going to be a soldier. But he is well educated, he's well bred, and he understands a lot. And so a lot of these people turn out to be the upper middle class of the society. They are the ones who are dealing in judgment, they are the faqih, they are the writers, they are the historians, they are the physicians, and they are the core of the population in the Mamluks' time. So Muhammad was one of this, Muhammad II, was one of these people who you tried to imitate to him, that he is the one, or he is the architect of the mosque. Tell us about this period, please.
About the period of Muhammad?
About Muhammad in particular, because this is the only structure in Egypt that we find the name of the architect signed. The man has signed his name, which was hidden and nobody discovered except in the 1930s with the famous archaeologist in 1939 or 1935, Professor Hassan, as far as I remember, right?
Sure. I think what is very interesting about this specific monument, Islamic monument, is that first of all you have the name of the architect.
Yes.
And that is, as you said, a bit unusual in its own way. But what is also very interesting is that we never actually knew the name of the architect until the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century. And so once we did discover this name, I would have thought that people would be interested to know more about this person. Who is this person? Why did he build this specific mosque? And why did he want to have his name engraved inside the mosque? And I think the fact that this happened in the 1940s, and yet we didn't have anyone write about this specific person until I wrote my novel. There's something that is very important. And to me, he was someone very inspiring. And in a way, and this is something I say for the first time, he reminded me of myself. I don't think that I did something as monumental and as important as he did, nor would I ever do that. But I think he reminded me of myself in the sense that I could see and feel how he gave his life and how he gave his spirit and how he gave his time and everything, all his thoughts and all his love for something that he's trying to create. And this is something that happens to me whenever I write a novel.
This is a masterpiece, because some people say, why Sultan Hassan? You have another mosque beside it that is as grand as it is, of course, totally different. Exactly. Because the Sultan Hassan mosque has a lot of unique things. First of all, it has 4 schools, and it's the first university ever in the world. It was before Oxford and before Cambridge, where there is a continuous education, where the professors and the students are living in the same quarters, and education was going on day and night with continuous supervision of the professors to the students in the 4 schools sections of al-fiqh. And this makes it very special and unique. And I think the S-shaped tunnel that leads you from the light and the sound to darkness and then to light again without sound is really mesmerizing to anyone who visits the mosque, with the grandiosity and the feeling of how diminished and how small you are to the grand appearance of the Almighty. And I think this makes the mosque very special. I know the feeling that you have by being touched. Every time I go to this mosque, I feel touched and I feel how small we are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's the thing. When I did go to the mosque for the first time, I was very moved. There was something amazing about it. The beauty of the engravings, the beauty of the place, the beauty of the writing. If you look at how it was built, you could see that it was built by an artist.
Yes.
Not just an architect, by an artist. And this artist must have given so much of his time and life to this building. And that's why in my novel, I tried to express that thought that Muhammad could not even hold or could not even live a normal life because he was obsessed in a way and building this mosque. So he was only thinking about the mosque and how to make it so beautiful. For him, this was his own child, and that was much more important than everything else. It took over his life, and that's why when he finished the mosque, there was nothing left in him.
Yes.
He was basically very lonely. He ended up, we don't even know how he ended up, and even history books, we don't know what happened to him. You know what I mean? Like, after the mosque was built, he disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very common. I mean, when you write something so good, or when you build something so good, and then you feel that part of you is already diminished.
I think this is really a very important point, and the idea of details in the mosque, the symmetrical asymmetry when he places large windows beside small windows, and on the other side, on their counterpart, there is the small windows in front of the small windows on the other side. And this symmetrical asymmetry, which gives you the sense of taste of differentiation and difference between people and between places. I think there was a lot of philosophy behind building this mosque. And of course, the money came, we have to tell our listeners that the money came from Beit al-Mal. And this was a huge amount of money that was found simply because there was the plague, the Black Death, and a lot of people died without inheritors. And the government inherited, and Sultan Hassan, although he was quite young, he decided that he is going not to use this money for building a palace for himself. He built this magnificent mosque. So it's also a memorizing, or a big memory of the plague that infested Egypt and the world.
Sure, and this idea that out of death, you had death, and you had the ugliness of people competing for power, people killing each other badly, and then you had this kind of magnificent, beautiful building coming in the midst of all of this kind of ugliness and ruthlessness around it. And that's extremely important, and death and the plague and everything that you've just mentioned now. So I think that's very important for us to understand that out of a lot of ugliness, there could be something so beautiful. And this is what makes life worth living.
Of course. And then we have to go to the second story. And I think we'll have to have a break to to give a chance to our listeners to grasp the first two sections of our program with the talented Dr. Reem Bsiyoni, Professor of Linguistics and the writer of the beautiful book, The Children of the People, the Mamluks Trilogy. Stay tuned to us in World of Info from Radio Cairo. So we're still on air with Dr. Reem Bsiyoni, Professor of Linguistics from the AUC and the author of The Children of the People, the Mamluks Trilogy, and we are going to the second part, or the second novel, about the judge of Qus. And this is a very interesting man. I like the man, as I was telling you off air, not because his name is Amr like me, but also a lot of things, right? Dr. Reem, are you still with us?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I mean, Amr, of course, is the same name like you, which is a very nice coincidence, because he's a very important and complex and I think very sympathetic character.
Yes, definitely. I like the idea that he is the grandson of Abd al-Karim. Sheikh Abd al-Karim is a very important character in your first novel, who was an important clergyman, an important honest man, who lived in the period of Nasr Muhammad and lost his life for the sake of his religion and his beliefs. And this made Amr, the grandson, carrying on his shoulders the righteous behavior. Of course, you know that there is difference between two things. Self-righteous people who always think that they are right, and these type of people we should avoid always, because they are not usually right. And the people who are always blaming themselves if they have done a mistake, or if whether they're always full of doubts, have they done the right thing or the wrong thing. And this is the intelligent characters and the strong characters like Amr, who is always blaming himself. Was he right or wrong? So, was he right or wrong, Amr?
That's a very difficult question. I don't think I can answer that. I mean, the readers could answer. What I could say is that he's a human being. He tried his best to do the right thing. He worked very hard against his own self, and I think that's what is always very important. I mean, that's the main idea of Islam, in my own opinion, which is trying to work very hard against what yourself, against yourself, basically against your own wishes that might go against what is good. And so he was trying to struggle with his own self throughout. Sometimes he did fail, and sometimes he did succeed, but he had a lot of courage throughout, and I think that's something we all have to be very sympathetic with him for.
Mm-hmm. And of course, they always know the problem is that the intelligent is always full of doubts and the stupid is full of confidence. So
that's true. That's true.
So the nice thing about this second novel, we're not going to go into details of the novel because I leave this to readers because they will enjoy it, because it's like a thriller, and every page brings another new part of the plot. So we're talking about the three meetings, and I think this is something that deserves to be said. You decided that Amr, the semi-fictitious character, has met and has lived and has intermingled with three very important historical characters. The Sultan Barquq, who is the first Jerkis or Borgi Mamluk Sultan, and this makes him very, very special in the history. And of course, meeting Ibn Khaldun, the man who came from the West, who came from Andalusia, and he has written on the Muqaddimat Ibn Khaldun, and of course he has written the most important paragraph about Cairo. He said, I've come to Cairo, Zahrat al-Madain, and one of the most beautiful cities in the world, the queen of all the capitals, and the words that were written by Ibn Khaldun are so mesmerizing and so heart stimulating. When you read such a great human mind writing these words with great admiration about Cairo, you will feel that definitely Cairo at that time was the capital of the empire. So you made Amr meet Sultan Barquq, you made Amr talk and give a beautiful philosophical talk with Ibn Khaldun, and you made Amr intermingle with the Mu'ayyid Sheikh, who is also a very famous sultan, a man who has seen the misfortunes and the fortunes. I mean, he was put into jail, and then he said that if I get released from this jail, I will destroy the jail and build the mosque, and he did that. And he puts the beautiful 2 minarets on top of Zuwayla Gate. So I love the idea. I love the idea of bringing these three characters. How it brought up to your mind to bring these three important historical characters into one man meeting?
I think this part of history is extremely important. As you mentioned, Sultan Barquq coming and now changing the history with the Cherkassi Mamluks or the Burji Mamluks coming into power. I think that has already changed a lot in the history, and then even their art is very different. And so with this new kind of dynasty coming into power, we also had very important scholars and very important people visiting Egypt, very influential people visiting Egypt, including Ibn Khaldun, for example. But we also had very important people within Egypt, like Makrizi, who also appears in this part at the very end of this specific part of the novel. And he's the historian who wrote the history of the Mamluks, and his history is very important for us. And so I couldn't write about this specific period without
making a reference to
yes, exactly, without actually referring to these very important people. And Sultan Barquq is an extremely interesting character. When I read about him in history, I read journal articles, and the journal articles about Sultan Barquq were amazing because they were talking much more about his character traits, and the kind of revolution against him, and then how he came back to power, and how he changed himself when he came back to power, and then the kind of corruption at his time, and then how he took hold of the religious endowments himself, and this kind of struggle between religion and the state that is always there. And so there was so much going on. It's such a rich time in Egyptian history. And again, when I did visit Sultan Barquq when I was young, the mosque and the school, and it was beautiful. It's amazing. It's just really looking even at the tiles in the floor is beautiful. Everything is beautiful about it. It's just a perfect building.
It's one of the peaks of architecture. And the nice thing about it is that although it is almost 100 and more years after the death, 150 years after the death of Nasr Muhammad, it is the one next door to Nasr Muhammad complex.
Sure.
And this makes it very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, it's so beautiful. And yet I visited it, and I just didn't know who Sultan Barkuk was. You know,
I mean, the name is Plum. You know, so everybody would say this is somebody who's not interesting. Nobody would know that he was a man of a great caliber.
Sure.
I know his grandchildren, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm one of them, by the way. I know
really? No, I know one of his families. You know, this is what's so interesting, because sometimes people would ask you this question and say to you, where are the grandchildren of the Mamluks? They are right between us.
Yes,
and
they are Egyptians.
Yes, I am very proud to know the ones of the grandchildren of Sultan Zahir Babers. A very distinguished lady.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, a very distinguished lady. And also, I know the grandchildren of Sultan Barkuk, very promising young man and young lady, who I really even once accompanied them to make them see their great grandfather mosque. So these people have their documents that prove, because of the endowments documents. I think that's when you're saying that you are the grandchild of Barkuk. This is totally true, because the endowments are written in it. The names of the ancestors. So that's why how sometimes people still keep a trace of the relation to the Mamluks, right?
Sure, definitely.
So we have seen the story of Amr and the evolving of the story of Amr and the beauty of it, and really I don't want to spoil the beauty of the story and the miss in the story and the ladies and the human factor and even sometimes of the imagination and the dreams and the daydreams of Amr when he was in jail. I will leave that to the readers, because this deserves to be read. We cannot say it in few words or few seconds. Don't you think so?
Definitely. Thank you so much for doing that. This is really
because we don't want to as we say in Arabic slang, burn the story for the readers.
Thank
you.
Because
Amr has a very interesting story to tell, so you have to read it yourself. So we'll go to the third story, because the third story is the bitter one. It's the one that produces a lot of bitterness, and I believe that you carry the same thing, that carry the feeling of. This was not opening up of Egypt. This was a conquest. This was an occupation. Right?
Sure. Definitely.
Tell us about this period and your feelings, because you have discussed a beautiful character of a man and a lady who crossed lines with each other in the middle of this invasion, ill-fated invasion.
Sure, and the relationship was very painful and sometimes violent, but it was just reflecting the pain and the violence and the ruthlessness of the time. And we're thinking about a time of an occupation, and the difference between an occupation and people who actually rule a country is that when you occupy a country, you're interested in taking over anything that is really valuable to your own country. There's lots of plunder happening when you occupy a country. But if it's your own country, then your capital is there, you live and die there, you defend it, you don't steal from it. And that's why there was this sentence in the novel where the protector does not steal and the thief is not a protector. And so I think that was extremely important and sort of reflects the main gist of this last part, and the painful relationship between Hind and Salar being the kind of the bitter warrior who's defeated, and how he copes with his defeat. And that was also something that I wanted to be very honest in expressing, and not necessarily make it very sweet, because that was not a sweet time. It was a very violent time.
I think the vision was beautiful in certain important point. We can really honestly divide the Mamluks of this time into three categories, and you carefully divided them into Inal, Salar, and Qunso al-Adli. Inal, the one who died for the cause, the one who had the courage to stand against the Ottomans and sacrifice his life, even by instructions to Salar, kill me if you find me that I'm going to be trapped. So Inal is one of the very chosen few who decided to keep his loyalty to the Sultan, to the Tumambai, and to the legacy of the Mamluks. Salar is the one who got injured, not just physically, but he also got injured emotionally and psychologically, and he changed and metamorphosed from the fact of being victorious and a proud soldier to a defeated one. And Qunso al-Adli, the human being who decided that he's going to give in and change his loyalties. So this is history, and you were quite honest about it. You didn't try to show that all the Mamluks were like Inal, or not all the Mamluks were somebody who's going to withdraw to lick his wounds like any wild animal like Salar. But Qunso al-Adli was the greatest amount of them. These are the ones who joined forces with the Ottomans and established their authority and their presence in Egypt, right?
Yes, I totally agree. And I did show three different warriors, and the three different warriors had, different ideas, and they ended up in different ways. One of them died. The other, as you said, just accepted defeat but didn't give in ever. And he didn't accept defeat but was defeated and never gave in. And then the third one accepted defeat and worked with the winner. With the winner. And I think that's the difference between the three. And there were three. This is exactly what happened with the Mamluks as well.
Mm-hmm. So, before we leave the program and before we leave this interesting hour, we have to give a mention to a very important character, and two important characters actually in this period that every Egyptian has to know about. Khair Bey, or Khaim Bey, the traitor.
Sure, exactly.
The commander on the right side of Qunso al-Ghori army, who decided to sell the Egyptian army to the Ottomans in return for becoming a governor of Egypt under Selim I. And the great defender of the Mamluk dynasty, and the honest man and the last sultan of the Mamluks, Tumambay II. So, two controversial characters, don't you think so?
Definitely. I mean, Khair Bey is of course not necessarily controversial because Egyptians consider him as the evil.
Yeah.
And there is no controversy about him in that sense. And so he's a character. Although given that his mosque is still very beautiful.
But so, you know what? Yeah. Since you brought up the mosque, there are two things about the mosque. First of all, it's in the Saliba street and it's in the direction of people as they're going to the citadel. But the Egyptians decided that they are not going. They changed the route to the citadel so that they don't pass by Khair Bey Mosque.
That's true, and they never actually prayed there.
Yes.
And so this is showing, again, the active role Egyptians played. Because lots of people ask me, so did the Egyptians play a lot of role in this period? Of course they did. They were the craftsmen. They were, as you said, they accepted some rulers, they didn't accept others. They loved some rulers, they didn't love others. That was extremely important. I tried to reflect that in the novel as well.
And the second point about the mosque is that half of the minaret was lost in 1992 earthquake. So so if we're going to lose the minaret although it's important masterpiece, but thank God we didn't lose other minarets of good faithful Mamluks.
I was still thinking about it at the time of the Mamluks, yes, definitely.
Yes. So when we talk about this period, we have to give a mention of Qunso al-Ghori, because there was a lot of. This is a controversial character. You agree about that, right? Because the man tried to defend his kingdom, and that was good from his side. But the man was. Everybody hated him because he has put a lot of taxation on the Egyptians, and they decided that they're not going to pray in his mosque, and they called it Masjid Haram. So it's the mosque of the thief.
I think with Qunso al-Ghori, we need another. We need to speak for another hour.
Yes.
I think he was a little bit. He was. Of course, it was written that he was a bit ruthless, but we need to understand him within the context of his time.
Yes.
We have the Cape of Good Hope.
Yes.
That's
what I was pushing you to say.
Exactly. So we have this new way that made Egypt very poor in its own way. But not only that, there were other wars as well. There were certain things that I searched on this and I wrote about it. I don't want to say when and how, because this is all a surprise. But I think al-Ghori is someone that we again need to contextualize.
Yes.
And we need to think about within his own times. And I think once we do that, he's not going to be the evil person we think he is.
Yes, but we want to tell our listeners that Tumambay stays in the hearts of the Egyptians, and he stays buried somewhere in the under the dome of Qunso al-Ghori, because they were afraid to put him in the mausoleum, because they buried him there under the night, the cover of the night. They buried to Mumbai after being put on the gallows for few days. The faithful and the loyal Egyptians buried him in the dome, and so everybody should, when he passed by Qunsaw al-Ghori dome, knows that Tumambai is buried there as well. So before I leave you with this very interesting talk, really we enjoyed very much this afternoon with Professor Reem Basioni, the professor of linguistics in the AUC and the author of the beautiful novel that I advise everyone to read, The Children of the People, or the Mamluks trilogy. You have to promise us two things, please. May I ask you that?
Yes, sure.
The first thing is that you should come again, please. Hopefully
Definitely,
in person.
I would love to.
And the second important point, we're going to discuss your other novels, which I believe they are also very nice and beautiful.
Thank you so much.
And the second most important thing, with a talent like yours, with research and tools of research that you're mastering, you have to give peace of your mind and piece of your activities, your avid activities, to the Ayyubid dynasties, to the early Mamluks. There are a lot of beautiful sagas and beautiful novels and beautiful stories to be told about Egypt in the Ayyubid period, in the Mamluks period, that deserves somebody who's talented like you to write about. Please.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely start searching and doing research about this period. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure.
Thank you so much for the recommendation.
It's a great pleasure for us to have you with us, Professor Reem Basioni, Professor of Linguistics in the AUC and the author of Children of the People, the Mamluks trilogy. It was a really pleasant, enjoyable afternoon to have this enriching talk with you, Professor Reem. We hope that we're going to see you soon. And this was the World of Info, coming live from Radio Cairo, Studio 3. Stay with us tuned to Radio Cairo.